and then maybe include one hidden layer and have one neuron and then train this, right? So you will be able to see that this layer has learned an inversion as to where the orange data is not present and the blue data is not present, and has learned a separation in pretty less number of training steps. So this is explainable. But what happens when we take a data that is not linearly separable? For example, this one. And maybe we try to train the same neural network. So it does not work. So the next step that we take is we increase the number of hidden layers. We increase the number of neurons because each neuron is a function approximator. So we try to get a better function approximator to approximate this nonlinear data. And now when we train this, you will see that it is pretty well able to generalize to this data set. But if you now zoom into the neurons, can you tell me what this neuron is learning? Maybe it is learning. Yeah, please go ahead. Yes, it's learning a function, but maybe it is learning a place where orange cluster is not present. Okay. So it is learning something where orange is present. This looks outright wrong. We don't know what this is learning, right? So it has some area of blue where orange is also included. If you go deeper into the layers, you will see this gets more abstract. So the number of neurons we increase, the non-linearity increases with the layers. And it is very difficult for us to explain what is happening. Now we can drop one hidden layer and you will see that this is also able to generalize to the data. Okay. So there is some ambiguity about the architecture to select as well. So we can go for higher function approximators, but we don't know whether it will over approximate, what the layers are going to learn, what features are going to be there inside the layer. So in general, this structure is non-explainable. And that is where the problem lies with the modern deep learning techniques today. Okay, so was I able to make myself clear?
Yes.
Yes. Explainable means we are not able to clearly define a separator. Is it?
Yeah, we are not able to tell what function this is or how it is contributing to the final output. Okay, so we cannot say why. We clearly see this output is right, but we cannot tell why. What was it that led to the decision of this output? And since we cannot, tell why this is happening, it is very difficult to trust these systems. So now I shall move back to the slides. And before I start, let me hear from you what you think a trusted AI system would be.
It should have a proper feedback mechanism.
Feedback as in you should be able to, so the human should get some kind of a explanation from the neural network. Okay, anything else?
Uh,
We trust that the AI will be able to give correct output for each input.
Okay.
and for the given solution, we can ask questions and then think whether should we go for it or not.
Okay. So yes, all of you are correct. So it is a broad set of terms that defines a trusted AI. So we have certain ethical guidelines that we want to follow to avoid problems or accidents and unintended harmful behavior that may emerge from poor design of real world AI systems. So there are a lot of category when we talk about trustworthy AI. The ones we were currently discussing were reliable. So there should be some explainability, some accountability. It should be transparent, robust. There can also be an issue of safety, that what we are building should not be easily broken with attacks. And then we have responsibility that it should be fair when it is giving the judgment, and it should be ethical. So essentially, autonomous vehicles should not kill a pedestrian. So these things collectively form the domain of trusted AI. And the question remains as to why are we looking into this domain? So in the past, AI has had a lot of success stories, but there have been some very interesting failures as well. So for example, in 2017, Facebook had built a chatbot, and this chatbot, they started talking in their own language after a set of training. So they modified the English language, dropped certain words and started repeating certain words, and they optimized the language in their own terms, which was not human understandable. So finally, these chatbots had to be shut down. Also, AI is being applied in a lot of safety critical applications, which have this question of death included in them. So in May 2021, Waymo, which is a Google's subsidiary, it had designed a self-driving car, and it got confused at an intersection, and then when the expert team arrived, it started running away from them, so it went rogue. In 2018, a Uber self-driving car had killed a pedestrian. So these kind of fatalities, they really raise a question on these intelligent systems. We also have the question of bias. So in recommendation systems or hiring system, if the data set is biased, so for example, you had given a data set which had recruited more male candidates than female candidates, so automatically the recommendation system will have a bias towards male candidates. You may have heard of this generative adversarial networks, which can create realistic data from a distribution. So these are used for deep fake videos, which have been circulated and have caused a lot of political turmoil in the past. And the last one is not dangerous, but it is AI writing a novel. So AI has also ventured in these domains of art and novel writing and music. And it is interesting how this novel ends. So it says the day a computer wrote a novel, the computer, placing priority on the pursuit of its own joy, stopped working for humans. So we definitely don't want that to happen going ahead in time. So when we are building a AI system, we will look for these concrete problems and we will try to solve them. So we will take an example of a cleaning robot. And say you have designed a cleaning robot using RL and you wanted to respect these constraints. So while cleaning, the robot may tumble a bucket of water and it may harm the environment and itself. So we don't want that to happen. We want to get away from these negative side effects. So we want the AI system to respect certain safety specifications. Also, the robot may just close its eyes and say, well, there is no mess around. So it is called reward hacking. You may have seen this in the RL slides as well, where the boat that is there, it goes round and round collecting rewards. And that may cause the AI system to take a shortcut towards the goal, which we don't want. So the cleaning robot may also throw away mobile phones while cleaning or go into unintended explorations, causing harmful actions. And we don't want that. We want the robot to respect aspects of the objective that are too expensive to evaluate. So you cannot always evaluate the robot at every step. That will be a very expensive venture. So we wanted to respect the safety specifications that were given for it. And finally, this is a very interesting problem and it happens a lot. So we generally train the machine learning model on a particular training set, which has a probability distribution. But when we go for deployment, the probability distribution that is there in the real world is not known. So it can be very well be different from the training distribution that we have. So when the training distribution changes, we don't want the machine to perform in a very wayward way. So we want the AI system to have robustness towards distributional shift. So these are the 5 problems that have been identified while building AI systems, and we will try to account for these problems further on while we try to design our intelligent system. So in this particular course, we have looked into 2 methods. One is based on data, where we have a training data, and this data can be a set of images, it can be a time series data, And we try to train a deep learning model based on this data. So we try to train a feed-forward network or convolutional neural network. We have RNNs. We try to do some gradient update, and finally get a result as classification, regression, clustering, etc. So we have a deep learning model that is sitting inside, and this is called data-based artificial intelligence. We have also learned about classical AI methods like planning or graph search, where we have a knowledge base, and based on that knowledge base, we use certain rules from the inference engine to get an answer, like decision trees, which are explainable in nature. And interestingly, when we plot an explainability versus accuracy graph, these classical methods are explainable, but they're not very accurate or they're not very generalizable. But the more we traverse towards accuracy, neural networks gives us better accuracy. It is generalizable. It can work with non-symbolic data, but it is not explainable. So we want to lie somewhere here where we both have accuracy and explainability, and we want to find a method that can give us both. And if you see, interestingly, deep learning methods are robust to noise and they can learn from non-symbolic data, but they require a lot of data to generalize, and they're not interpretable. On the other hand, symbolic programs, they do not require much data. They only require a set of rules and they're interpretable, but they are not good in noisy data or non-symbolic data. So they have complementary strengths and weaknesses. And it is a very interesting domain to merge these two methods and to get best of both, so that it can give us both explainability and accuracy. So we will first look into vision-based deep learning and try to understand the problems that occur there. So if you give the image of Kung Fu Panda to a CNN, it will classify this tiger as a vase. Now why this happens is because this tiger has certain patterns of vase. You can see this curve here. Let me bring out the laser pointer. Right, so it has a pattern of vase, and maybe that pattern is catched by the CNN. But we as humans, we will not do the deduction like that. We will look at the the features, the colors, the patterns, but we will also look at the tail and the paws and say, this is more likely an animal than a vase. So CNNs, or any neural network, they latch onto certain high dimensional components for classification. They are pattern based, so they look in for patterns in the classification, and then they have this nonlinear layers like we were seeing in the demo that take out these features from the image. And these features are not interpretable by human beings, but we as human beings, we don't classify that. We have a pattern matching sense in us, but we also have certain amount of deduction. So because neural networks have this pattern matching, it is easy to break them. So you can add certain noise and that will change the pattern inside the image, and the classification can entirely change, which is called adversarial attacks. So this noise is not human imperceptible, but it will change the perception of the neural network completely. Also, there is this very famous example. So while training a CNN, a set of images were given to it where it was told to predict wolf and husky, and all the wolf images had snow in the background. So the classifier learned that if there is snow in the background, then it is wolf, and if it is no snow in the background, then it is husky. So when there was a husky image given to this classifier, it predicted it as wolf, only because it had snow in the background. So these kind of wrong feature learning can also happen inside a CNN. So let me show you this. I have a convolutional neural network here which recognizes images of digits, and if I write a 3 here, so it will be able to recognize this very nicely, right? So the first guess is 3, and you can see up in the layers 3 is being predicted. Okay, what if I write a 3 here? This is a 3, right, from human perspective. But the guess is 1. What if I just put dots here? This is not a digit at all, but the neural network still guesses something. It says, you know, with high confidence, it says, well, this is a 7. So do you see the problem here?
You said that the neural network is predicting 7 with high confidence. Means how do we get to know about confidence of prediction?
So finally, at the end of this neural network, there will be a softmax layer, which will give you probabilities. So it is predicting 7 because it has the highest probability of getting 7. Maybe out of 10 digits, it has 50% probability or 60% probability of giving 7. Was I able to answer your question?
Yes. So yes.
What if you write a letter, let's say A?
Yeah, so then that will also have some prediction because, well, this neural network does not have an out of class distribution, but A has certain features of 4 and 9. So it will take those patterns and then say, well, this is 9 or 4. So what essentially is happening inside this neural network is pattern matching with some high dimensional features, which we are not able to understand.
Ma'am?
Yeah.
Ma'am, yeah.
Yeah.
So at first, when it was clear that the number was 3, for first guess, was the probability high then?
Yeah.
Let's say around 90%, and the second guess, the probability would be 60% like that, or the neural
If
net
it is
always
90%, then the second one will be 10%. So entire probability has to be 100%. Yeah. So
Actually, what I'm saying is, when the 3 was not clear, was the first guess probability was lower than the probability when it was actually clear.
yeah, that may happen. That may happen. So
Okay.
here there are 3
Okay.
guesses where 3 things have lit up. So this is highest, but obviously because 3 things have lit up, the probability of this is less than the one we had, where we had a clear shot deduction. So this is an example of distributional shift, where in the real world where we have test data, it may come in all types of form. It may also come in this manner, right? But you can clearly see that well-trained and well accurate neural network, which we had given a lot of accuracy during testing, is not able to generalize to this. Okay, so let us go back. So we will look into certain broad methods of, you know, having this trust or explainability inside an AI system. And the first one that we are going to look into is how we can explain this decision of a model, which can have this SHAP based explanations, or there is a certain toolbox called LIME, which I'll be going through, or you can use perturbations inside the model. We can also have example based explanation like adversarial or counterfactual. And then we will see how we can combine classical AI with deep learning. So we can combine CNN with decision trees or RL with planners and programs, and then we can build some amount of explainability into the system because it uses a symbolic backend. And finally, we will look into certain methods of having safe or verified AI. So there is a particular domain of study called formal methods, which can mathematically guarantee that an intelligence system is safe. Also, we can do things like reward modeling and gradient updates to induce the safety into the system while we are learning. So the first thing that we will look is model agnostic explanations. So this particular method is called LIME. It is local interpretable model agnostic explanations. And say I have had this data set which had a stroke and no stroke data, and I have learned this classifier, which is this blue decision boundary. So anything that falls within the blue decision boundary is no stroke, and anything that falls outside it is stroke. But this decision boundary is complex and it is difficult for us to explain. So say I wanted explanation for this point, this red point that I have, and I wanted to know why this is being classified as stroke. So if I zoom into this particular red point, we can actually have a linear separator here. If we forget about the entire decision boundary locally, for this point and the points neighboring it, we can have a linear separator. And then we can say, if things fall in the right of this line, we have no stroke. In the left of this line, we have stroke. So the idea is to train a model where we have input features as X, and then F is our complex model, which is this blue decision boundary. And then we want to have a simple model, which is this line, such that the distance between the two in their locality remains minimum. Right? So we want to go from here to here, but only in the locality of the particular output that we want to explain. And then we can choose the simple model to be any explainable model like a line or a decision tree, but we want the complexity of that model to be less. So if we are choosing a decision tree, then we want the depth of the decision tree to be less. So what we will do is we will take this particular point and then we will generate a set of data around it. We will take this data, we will pass it through the complex model to get the output, and then on that labeled data set, we will try to train a simple model like a linear regression model. So the entire workflow is something like this. So we have a black box model, which is a neural network. We take a particular point and generate n number of random points within that. We take points that are close to that particular example that we are trying to classify. And then we pass it through this black box model to get the output of this randomly generated points. And we train a linear classifier or decision tree, some kind of explainable model on top of that to get the explanations around that local boundary. Okay. So you can give it images and then it will be able to tell you why a classification of an electric guitar or acoustic guitar or a Labrador was made. So it will highlight those features. You can also give it tabular data, and then maybe if this is classified as lime, it will tell you, well, the sulfate was within this range and the alcohol content was within this range, and hence the classification was made as lime. So it will essentially give you importance of each feature for the classification using a local approximator of the entire function. Any questions?
Can you explain that how this method, the method of the separator that you described, local separator, is actually working on the image shown on the top? I mean, what is the separation criteria there?
Yeah, so for this one, we will take one particular image and then we will try to generate similar data for that image. So we will perturb this image and we will have a set of similar data for this. And then we will have some kind of a decision tree or linear model, and we will give that decision tree this as a data set. So this image and its classified label. So if this is classified as Labrador, then we will give this image and Labrador as its tag. And then that separator or that explainable model, if it is a decision tree, that will tell me why this was classified. So then it will take out these features from there and then it will say, well, I see a guitar more in this part of the image, so I am classifying this as a guitar.
Okay, so the decision tree nodes will be the features.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
But in the second case, you have, lime, the picture of a lime. So how does it also evaluate on other information like the sulfur dioxide density, this and
Yeah.
that?
So this is symbolic, and actually we have a tabular data which we are training on, right? So I have just given an image to show that lime can classify lime as well. But say we have a tabular data on which we had trained a neural network.
So how do you actually, enforce that this tabulated data on an image?
No, this is not image. So this is model agnostic. So it will work for any model. The top one is for a CNN based model or an image based model. The below one can be a simple feed forward neural network which works on texts. So it can work on any model. It will just take the locality of the features and then try to train some explainer on top of it. Okay.
Okay. Is the neural network assessing the image or based on the tabulated data, what possible vegetable or fruit it can be?
Yeah, no, so it can assess, so this particular decision boundary that I showed, this can be a CNN that is classifying an image. This can be a simple feed forward network that is classifying text data. This can be any model. Okay, so it is a black box model. This one. We don't know what model it is, or we don't need to know what model it is. All we need to know is the data that we are seeking explanation for. We generate something in locality of it, some other data points, and we replace this complex model with a simple linear model or a simple explainable model. And then we pass this data through the black box model to get the tags in form of training data set, and we train this simple model on top of it. So this black box model can be any neural network.
So this entire thing is just because of accountability of that particular red point.
Yes, yes. So we are just trying to understand what features led to the decision of the particular classification, but we cannot do it through the neural network. So we are training something in place of the neural network that is explainable.
Okay, good.
Excuse me, ma'am. One question I have is that how
Yeah.
do you decide the width of the local boundaries? So, like, how small a
Yes.
local interval should be?
Yeah, so there is kernel. They use something called an exponential kernel. So they have this decision metrics that have been given in the paper, and that can be, that is experimental. So you can change it according to your own needs.
Okay.
So you can go through this paper. No, why should I trust you? It's a very highly cited paper, and it is used in a lot of industry applications as well. Okay. Okay, so then moving forward, we can also have something called counterfactual explanations. So when we talk about counterfactuals, so say I have the same data set of stroke and no stroke. And for a particular prediction in the table, I have that, if you have your age 67, BMI 30 for gender male, you have stroke. And then I give the user an explanation that if you reduce your BMI to 25, then you will not have stroke. So that is an explanation towards the user. So what we want to find is the smallest change in the input features such that my prediction will change to another predefined output. So I want to minimize this input feature X to another input feature X prime such that the decision changes to some class C. Okay. So when we give this as an explanation, it is called counterfactual explanation. When we use it as an attack, it is called adversarial attacks. So we can also perturb the image in a very less manner, or we can change the image in the smallest manner such that the prediction changes to some other class, which we were seeing in the panda image. So that is adversarial attack on neural networks. So one way of doing that is to treat this particular objective of finding a different input as an optimization objective. So say, for example, we had a neural network which gave us a velocity of a car given certain input features. So maybe the location, the surrounding traffic conditions, and we were giving that as an input to the neural network, and it gave us the velocity of the car. So we want the velocity of the car to be always greater than or equal to 10. So our assertion is that velocity minus 10 is greater than or equal to 0. We want to find inputs such that velocity minus 10 is less than 0. So that is negation of this particular specification, and any input that satisfied this negation will be a violation towards that specification. So if I find an input that has velocity 9, that is an adversarial example for me, or a counterfactual example for me. So we have some optimizer that sits here and it queries the neural network with input. It observes the output, and it is a way of intelligently searching the neural network hyperspace. So it and once the specification is validated, we have adversarial examples from the optimizer. That is one way of doing it. There are many other ways of finding counterfactual explanations, but this is one of the ways that is very popularly used. In place of the optimizer, generally we use something called Bayesian optimization, but that we can take up later if you're interested. I'll not go into details of Bayesian optimization now. Okay. Okay, so we looked into this feature-based explanation and counterfactual-based examples for explanation. Now we shall move into how we can combine this classical AI with the kind of deep learning AI that we use today. And this domain is very popularly called neurosymbolic AI. So we have two very distinct parts of our brain. One is the right-hand side that is used for perception and pattern matching, and the left-hand side that is rational and logical, that is used for all kind of symbolic reasoning and mathematical reasoning.
In the last case, by querying with input, we are learning the function.
Yes. So this optimizer is trying to minimize this velocity function. It's a minimization problem that this optimizer is trying to solve. It is querying and then observing the output of this velocity function, and then providing inputs accordingly.
Okay.
So neurosymbolic AI will try to combine the best of both worlds. So if I say, for example, try to identify an image of a coronavirus, we will have some learning mechanism that will give us the features, and then there will be some reasoning graph which will see spikes, crown, and capsid, and then have certain logical mechanism to finally give the output of the coronavirus. So it is a marriage of both the systems in certain senses. And why do we want to do this is because we have a lot of variations in the input that we see in the real world. So for example, there is this work by DeepMind where they're trying to learn a less than relationship. So less than relationship is very easy to define programmatically. But what if we have the digits as handwritten when we are trying to learn this less than relationship? So then it becomes difficult for the program to identify these digits because this can have many variations inside them. So what people generally do is they use some kind of a deep learning methodology like CNN to identify the handwritten digits, and then have a program that gives you this less than relationship inside it. So once the digits are identified, then it is very easy for the program to determine whether the less than relationship is true. Also, a problem with having an end-to-end machine learning system with this particular methodology is that, say you in your data set you have given these numbers 2 less than 3, 3 less than 4, 4 greater than 2. What if you get a new number which says 5 less than 6? Then it is very difficult for the neural network to understand that relationship because it has never seen that data. So that is why people try to have a reasoning backend. They have a training loop which sees the predicted results and then trains the CNN and also tries to modify the program accordingly. So when we talk about vision, this kind of graphs where we could have symbolic reasoning has been present since a lot of decades. So there has been a lot of research around it. One popular way is using an Andor graph. You had learned about Andor graphs in your course, and that can be implied in images as well. So if I had a clock, this is an node, so it will have hands and frames and numbers. Then these frames will have certain features associated with them from where we can choose an OR. And finally, we can have certain terminal symbols, which if you do a top-down traversal or a bottom-up traversal of this graph should give you the explanation for the image and also the image as well. But the problem with this kind of a structure is this terminal symbols are infinite in the real world. So you will not be able to cast all the variations in one Andor graphs if you try to build it. So one of the works that we did in our lab, taking inspiration from this, is we tried to break these particular components in a set of symbolic representation that could be learned by the machine learning system. So like I was saying, or like we saw, that this real world tokens can have a lot of variations, and they can have sometimes ambiguous relationship in multiple classes. For example, this particular digit that you see, it can be classified as 1, or it can also be classified as 7, depending on the context. This 5 that is there, some people may as well write this as 3, right? This kind of ambiguity exists in alphabets as well. So any handwritten or any real world tokens will have ambiguities like this. So one way of handling this is that we have certain model that learns the components of a particular image. For example, if we are trying to do a bicycle classification, then it can learn the wheels in the frame, and then we can deploy a decision tree to come to the final decision. So we have, there is a network known as YOLO V3 network, which gives you localized output. So it will tell you where a particular image is and what is the decision boundary of that image. And from there, we can extract components and then have a very simple decision tree, which just tells us, if there are 2 wheels and 1 frame, and if they're within range, then probably it is the bicycle. And if it is not satisfied, if there is only 1 frame, then you can go back to the loop and then ask the CNN to localize its search on certain parts of the image so that it gives you the wheels as well. So interestingly, this framework, it is able to give you explanations. So when you're trying to classify a bicycle, you can tell, 2 wheels were detected, 1 frame was detected, and they were within range. It is also able to classify certain things that well-known CNNs are not able to do. For example, VGG16 will classify this as a bicycle because you can see the patterns here are almost same. So we have 2 badminton rackets lying side by side, but they look like wheels to the CNN. So if you pass it through this decision tree, then it will say, well, these components were detected, but they were in all wrong places and the associations were wrong, so we cannot classify this as a bicycle. Similarly for a cannon. Also, interestingly, you can also classify certain out of the distribution examples that the neural network had not seen because the components are similar. So you can, if you have 1 wheel that is detected, you can say, well, this is unicycle, or 3 wheels detected and 1 frame detected, you can say this is tricycle. So that is the advantage of having a reasoning framework on top of a machine learning model. But for that, you will have to kind of intelligently choose the task distributions between the 2 models. Okay. So this can also be done for reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning, as you know, is the method of mapping observations to actions using some deep neural network such that the reward is maximized. So this can be termed as a planning problem, where a planner takes high-level actions and a neural network takes low-level actions. So if I wanted to open a door, I will have to move towards the door, I will have to activate the doorknob, and then I'll have to push. So these high-level steps can be decided by a planner, which is explainable from initial state to goal state. And then the low-level actions can be learned by a RL network as to how much force I want to put on the door to push, or how much I need to rotate the doorknob to activate it. So this kind of division is done for RL networks as well. We can also have a transportation plant where these can be the actions like pick up and drop, and then what is the force for pick up, what is the distance for drop, everything. These can be learned using RL policy. So there has been a lot of marriage recently between planners and RLs in order to solve tasks. Also, we can use programs in order to train the RL agents. So this particular work, which is called program guided RL, it says that English language instructions can be ambiguous. So there is an instruction here which says if there is a river, build a bridge, repeat the following 3 times, mine a gold, and if environment has no more than 8 gold, mine iron and then sell iron. So this can be interpreted in 2 ways. One, within the loop you can mine gold and check whether the environment has enough amount of gold and then sell the iron. Or you can mine gold within the loop 3 times and then do the rest outside the loop. So there can be ambiguous interpretations of English language instruction. Hence, they propose learning a program where they will have this task in terms of a program, and then the lower level policies like mining and selling can be learned using an RL policy. So it checks the environment, it checks the perception module, queries the program, and then finally takes a decision. Okay, so taking a cue from this, we also tried to implement this on autonomous driving tasks. So driving, as you know, is a sequence of particular tasks that we need to do. For example, we need to drive straight till a particular distance. Then we have to take a turn. We have to change lanes. So what initially used to be done is taking an entire RL policy and training it for the entire driving task, which used to be non-explainable and which used to be expensive to train as well. So what we did is we broke it down into a set of maneuvers like straight drive, right turn, lane change, and then we trained a master program that could look at the route waypoints and then trigger the required RL agent to complete the task. And because we had a programmatic backend, we could have certain safety specifications embedded inside the program, like checking the distance with the lead vehicle and then applying brake if the distance is less than some safety threshold. And the program in itself is a verifiable entity, so we could give verification guarantees on top of the program as well. So this is another use case where you can combine a classical model with a set of RL agents and then have an explainable interface in terms of the symbolic backend that you're using. So I have this video where you can see that, you know, this particular agent is switching between maneuvers, like straight, now it will do a left turn, and now it will again go straight. Okay, so that trigger is being done by a program, and all the safety checks are being done by the program. And this straight agent is an RL agent that is in action. So any questions till this point?
What happens if if any scenario cannot be explained by the master program? So what does the RL agent do in that case?
No, so can you give me an example as to what you mean by that? So what happens in the master program is, like, we use Google Maps, right? So which tells you drive straight for 250 meters. So we have a mission planner like that in the master program, which tells, you know, at this route you have to take a straight drive. And then the straight drive is an RL agent, which tells you what is the actuation for that particular straight drive that you need to do. So if there is something that is out of the way, for example, suddenly a car comes and does you will see this red car will do that. It suddenly changes lane, right? So then the supervisor applies brake, which is a set of safety specification that is embedded inside the program. So if there is something that is unsafe that is happening, then the program takes over and takes the required action. Okay. Okay, so now we shall move into the last part, which I have not gone into much details because you all are not aware about formal methods till now. So what we want to do in this particular setting is we want to embed some safety specifications inside the model while learning. Okay. So for example, if I am constructing a decision tree and I have been given this table as a data, and which sees the yes.
Actually, in the last case, let's say an adversary comes before us, so and let's say some adversary is also behind us. So therefore, there should be a control parameter as to when to apply the brakes or maybe reduce the velocity. So what will actually take care of that?
Yeah, very good question. It's a very good question, and it is an open research problem. So what we do in our framework is we have priorities. So say I have a block in front of me for a certain time bound, then I will do a lane change. But if I have something in my side while driving and not dual lane change. So we have this priority based rules written inside the program. ADAL as of now will not be able to handle that until you have trained it with certain constraints.
Okay.
Obviously, writing rules is exhaustive and it is difficult to handcraft so many rules because there can be n number of situations. But this is the best way as of now. But obviously, this is very open to research. So you can very well find a methodology inside ADAL where you can incorporate all these things.
Yeah, so just to add to that, so it is not possible in general to design a system which is guaranteed to be free of accidents because of the reason that you mentioned, that there are two adversaries and they act in such a way that regardless of what you do, you will have a crash either with this or that. So that is a possibility. So in terms of systems, intelligent systems like autonomous vehicles, there is a term called responsible safety behavior, which means that in the event of a crash, it should be the case that the autonomous vehicle is not blamed for causing the crash. So it has to always stay within certain well-defined rules, which guarantees that the situation that led to the crash is not attributed to the autonomous vehicle. So there is a company called Mobileye which floated this idea, and then that company has been thereafter been acquired by Intel, and they are working on this area, that how to make sure that responsibility is not attributed to the autonomous vehicle. But you're right. I mean, there can be situations where the structured program will find out that there is no way to avoid an accident. Yeah, Vritti, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So we were talking about, including safety as a part of the model. So we have been given this data as a decision tree data, and then we learn something like this, right? So in this data set, there is no data that says if cap color not being cap shell equal to bell and gill color equal to green, then, whether it's poisonous or edible. But because there is no data, we don't know about the decision of that particular attribute. And for example, say cap shell equal to bell and gill color equal to green are poisonous. So now if I get a data during testing where cap color is yellow, but it has all these attributes as well, it will be classified as edible because it had not seen that data. So in general, safety, it requires a bias inside the system, and that bias can be included inside the information gain metric by including this extra safety based data in terms of the inside the equation. So that bias can be created. There's a particular work, and you can ask Shumanto about it. He's the author of this work, where this kind of safety can be augmented inside the decision tree using the information gain metric. We can also do this for ADAL. So we had talked about adversarial counterexamples in one of our slides. So we can have a particular trained ADAL model, and then we can try to find adversarial counterexamples from that ADAL model using an optimization module. And when we have this set of adversarial examples, we can use this as a new data set to train another ADAL model that will give us correct actions for this adversarial examples. And once we have that ADAL model, we can do a selective gradient update on the original model. So we can change the probability of the actions that were leading to this adversarial counterexamples by tweaking the gradient inside the model and then get a corrected model. So for example, if we had a trained policy for landing a lunar rover and we did this optimization on top of it, you will see there are traces where this crash keeps happening, even though the policy is optimized and tuned to a good reward, because during the deployment, certain parameters had changed. And then you can take these examples and train a new ADAL policy and then update this original policy so that the lander lands at the particular position that you are designated to do. So these are some broad methods of including safety. Obviously, I did not go into much detail. So if you want any more information, you can write to us or you can contact us, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So I think that is it from my side. Yeah. So that is the end from my side. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have, and thank you for attending. It was a very nice interactive session.
And as of now, we are assessing the thing that we have learned about information gain. We generally assess with entropy. So
Yeah.
how do we synthesize safety measures by just this concept? Is it possible?
Yes. So Shumanta, will you like to answer that question?
Hello.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes. So, what are your exact questions? Can you tell? Hello.
As of
I
now,
think his question is that how do you integrate safety into your information or information gain metric so that the decision tree constructed is determined to be safe? That's your question, right?
yes, sir.
Okay. One way to do that is a very brute force method, or can you say, I mean, very easy method is that you can augment your data set, okay, with your with the that is actually can you I mean come from that safety properties. Like here the safety property is cap shape bell and gill color is green. Then only thing you don't have is cap color. Cap color you can add multiple what the others cap color are. I mean, based on that you can say that okay, that is actually that is called data augmentation. Okay, so the problem with these things that there can be different cap color as well. So if but the descent tree, because of their as data has only three cap color right now, so descent tree, learn descent tree will always be right if we don't do any kind of uh, trimming actually. So that's a one way. Another way is after the post fact augmentation. That is, you build a descent tree from the data, then you actually modify the descent tree. Go to the branches where you can find there is a discrepancy between the discrepancy with the safety property. Then you can edit that those edges with the safety property. With the safety property. Like here we go to the yellow, cap color is yellow. Then we actually have to modify those things, because yellow, after yellow there can be possibility that cap shape can be bale and gill color can be green, and those will be poisonous, na? So those nodes we have to add. And another way, instead of adding in our first method, what we talked about, that data augmentation method. So instead of generating the data, there can be multiple, for large data sets, there can be millions of data that's actually you have to generate. So instead of doing that, we only require, to create the descent tree, we only require the information gain matrix, na? Information gain metric. So those metric we can actually during calculation of those metric we can augment using during the runtime, actually during the calculation of those we can augment with the safety property.
Okay, so I suggest one thing. Shumanto, just paste your paper in the Teams chat or in the Teams channel, and they can take a look at it. How we bias the information gain matrix with safety properties is something that is not so easy to explain. We will need more time to do that, but you can read the paper. And in case you have any questions after that, we can answer that.
Sure, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, so tomorrow, what we will do is we are going to look at a more generic perspective of this. So right now, this one was talking about safety in AI. Tomorrow we are, yes.
So tomorrow is Diwali. We have
Tomorrow is
holiday.
Diwali. Yeah, Friday. Then Friday.
Yeah.
On Friday, we will talk a little bit about the more generic setting of integrating classical AI with ML. And it's an area which we call reasoned artificial intelligence. So we will see how deduction and ML can work together.